So, good afternoon. My name is Breandan Knowlton. Thank you very much for the very kind introduction, Christos. I am, as advertised, I'm the director of Historypin.org, which is an online community archive platform. It's used by a lot of libraries and a lot of museums and a lot of archives around the world, really to engage people with heritage. I first thank you so much, Kostas and Postscriptum, for inviting me to come and join you in Athens, certainly one of my favorite cities, and it's lovely to be back. In order to try to answer this very difficult question about value and heritage and collections, I can start from the point of view of being an internet startup with no actual collections or people or curators or anything else except a big pile of digital files. And I can at least give you my perspective on the transformation of audience into community as part of that process. Thank you. In the heritage world, we often think of our audiences in terms of visitors. They visit our museum, they visit our website. And from what I've seen, visitors usually mean numbers. They're things that can be counted. You can stand in a doorway and you can count the number of people who come and see our spaces. And you can see, we can say, see, we had 13% more visitors this year than last year. They're numbers that just kind of come together. They're all the same, really. And we count our visitors in our physical spaces. So we make graphs and we make charts and we count them online. They come to our websites. We say, how many unique visitors did we actually have last month? And it's funny, we ask about unique visitors, but we don't really care much about the uniqueness. We don't care much about how those people are actually unique as humans, as people. And there's, I think, a continuum between an audience of visitors and a community of people. And that continuum, to me, has a lot to do with how we acknowledge those levels of uniqueness, the uniqueness of our humanity. So sometimes we think of our audiences as being users. We use that word a lot. We say that they use our museum services and they use our online collections. This, to me, is a step forward. We think of our audience as users because we see the context of use. Why people use something speaks to purpose. It speaks to intent. It speaks to what we want to use our museums for. And so we can try to understand our users and their values based on kind of who they are. What's their style of learning? What's their priority with our collection? What obstacles do they have? What sort of unique accessibility channels? But a user still isn't a person. A user is still a sort of composite. It's a pastiche or a collection of qualities that if we put them all together, we might think that we will find these qualities in the people who use our services and who use our places. So this is, an example of one of these pastiche people that we use when designing Historypin. It's kind of, what would somebody who is a community organizer want to do? What do they find to be a challenge? How digitally literate are they? It helps to understand their intent with the site. And it does help when we try to think about the people who use our services and use our places. But what if we actually thought about our audiences as individuals, as people? And this is very, very challenging. It's hard for us on the web. It's very hard in the physical world. But if we think of people not just as people, but actually as maybe partners, what if we wanted our audiences to use their unique abilities, use their unique memories to enrich our collections, give back to us? Maybe they can support our staff. Maybe they can make each part of our experiences better for each of the other people, users, visitors that we encounter. That would be a huge multiplication of effort. That would take us beyond just what we can do as individuals, as websites, as museums. If our users were actually our partners, they would be the ones who were creating a lot of the value for each other because they have these unique memories. They have these unique things they can do together. So we create Our service is for visitors based on an average of what they want, but we create partnerships with humans based on who they actually are. And communities are made of humans, not of visitors. So if we want to create these communities that believe in what we do enough that they want to share their expertise, we need to actually understand their values, which means not just, what's the value of being engaged in a community to us, but what do we have to offer these humans? What it is that we can do in exchange for the partnership that we're actually asking. So to partner with humans means that we need to create values and incentives that our users on one side perceive so that they want to enter into partnership with us and our institutions on the other side. They need incentives to engage and to connect and to share and to participate. If we want to make our audiences into active communities, that means we want them to share their attention and share their knowledge with us, which means that we actually need to create value for them. They're giving us value with their attention and their knowledge. So we need to create an equal amount of value for them. Not in any vague way, in a very concrete way. We need to be perceived as having that value. So what's the value that we can create as an organization? I see really there are three kinds of things that we can create as an organization and call it value. We can create financial value, we can create various kinds of user value, and we can create certain kinds of social value. And to me, those three are quite intertwined. Now, we don't usually talk about creating financial value for our users. We did talk about it a bit yesterday, especially in the context of Etsy, where a museum was creating value that ended up turning into artist-created works that reinterpreted and reused and used collections in a very direct economic way. The value to the Rijksmuseum that we heard about yesterday was in the value of their brand and in their public relations, which was so much more valuable even than the amount of control that they lost by giving control of their high-resolution images, and a bunch of people on Etsy were able to create crafts based on those images and create some actual financial value. That's one way. The other, we don't generally pay our visitors, though, to come and see us. We do offer other things that may feel valuable. We offer a safe and inexpensive place to bring children that's very predictable. We offer a free or inexpensive place for a group to meet, or a free activity for a school group to engage in, but mostly we don't focus on financial value for these audiences that we want to become partners. At Historypin, the financial value that we create is actually mostly for volunteers, citizen historians, heritage associations, libraries, and community groups. We try to make it easier or free to create and share things like online tours and exhibitions, allowing collections to be used in new ways. Our argument there is that we're saying you don't need an expensive designer for this particular thing. You don't need an expensive web developer for this sort of thing. You can use our tool. If we make the tools that are right for cultural heritage activists, then people will use our tools and be able to do certain things for free that they would otherwise have to pay for. That's a certain kind of value we try to give. The second kind of value, I think, as organizations, is what usually gets called user value, which is really the inherent quality. The inherent quality in our products and in our services and in our spaces. And creating strong user value is usually a design problem. It's usually a problem based on our understanding of our users and what matters to them. So heritage organizations, they do create very strong value for users. They create it through the exhibitions, they create it through interpretation, but also through the quality of the entire experience. Everything from the place where visitors leave their bags when they enter a place, all the way to a floor plan that supports a process of happy surprise and discovery. These are all design problems. We address them with the design disciplines of architecture and interpretation and documentation. In the digital world, it's a little bit harder. At Historypin, we try to create strong user value through our design, but we only have this one kind of little plane of surface, this little website that's running on somebody else's hardware. We don't even control the experience where someone can interact with content. But we can create a user value through a sense of participation, through an emotional then and now reaction, even of surprise, like if you can put the past alongside the present. But we also create user value by being a social space. We can embed users in a community that they know that tens of thousands of other people are there. They know that millions of people are looking at these objects every month, and so they can be part of a larger space. We can create the social sense of being supported and seen and connected. So to a certain extent, we're like the social platforms that Christos just mentioned, though a very specialized one, because it's one that's simply about engagement with heritage. We actually don't have nearly as many Facebook followers, so I'm a little bit jealous. And we shouldn't actually forget the third kind of value that our organizations can create. To a large extent, this is why we get funding, I think. We create social value, the kind that shows that we are all committed to a larger cause, that we can make some sort of positive change in the world in what we do. Sounds very vague. This is actually something that at Historypin we do a lot of research on this particular topic. We're organized as a nonprofit, so we have to be sustainable as a business, but we also need to meet our social objectives. And this is one advantage we have in that as a global website, we can try to do some measurement in different spaces and see what we come up with. For us, there's one big social problem that we can work on, I think, and it may seem a little bit surprising. This is actually one of the biggest social problems of our time. It's around connectedness. People actually don't join as many groups as they used to. People don't join as many clubs. They're not at church as much. They're not as involved in politics. They don't know their neighbors as well. And we have all of these beautiful ways of connecting to each other digitally and online and through loose association, but we actually don't see people that we know face to face as much as we used to. That seems like a trivial and old-fashioned thing to say, especially for someone who is working in an internet company, but it's actually pretty important. The engagement in groups turns out to be exactly the thing that creates an awful lot of well-being for people. People who are actively engaged in their communities, who see each other, who see other humans face to face on a regular basis, those are the people who live longer, they earn more money, they have fewer illnesses, they have fewer hospital visits, and their children do better in school. It's a very profound effect of actually meeting people in the real world. And oddly enough, as an internet company, this is actually something that we try to spend time looking at. We try to see, can we create a sense that people will connect with other people in their local place and feel a stronger sense of their local heritage. It's very important. Joining a group, you can expect to have the same health benefits as quitting smoking. It's that effective. And I know, it seems like it should be small, but it's not. I think that our museums and our heritage institutions and our big social websites, they can be connective forces in that area if we realize the value of local, if we realize the value of community, because we can offer these safe spaces. We can offer these places to meet. We can offer regular group programs, especially for older adults who tend to be more at risk of social isolation. We can involve some of the most knowledgeable people in our communities and use their unique gifts as people in a way that's actually quite beneficial to us as well, because we have the advantage of that expertise if we can create a value that is perceived to be equal. So Historypin works on this by organizing group sharing and remembrance sessions. They're very simple, they're very low tech. We invite residents to come along, and then they share things, they share what they remember, maybe they scan some new photographs or documents that help to tell the story of a place. We help people upload things to Historypin or just keep them. We hold these events in archives, in heritage sites, in museums, but we also hold them in pubs and in schools and in civic buildings and town halls. And the result of holding these kinds of events is that people get to know each other a little bit better, they form broader and deeper social connections, and they feel more connected to their heritage at the end of the day. And the surveys that we do tend to suggest that this is the case. People report that having come to a local history session or a local heritage group, that they feel that they know people better, they have more social resources that they can draw on, and they often meet people across different generations that they would not otherwise have come into contact with. The interesting thing is that our projects in the real world and our online platform, they tend to complement each other. More people coming to events almost always means more sharing of objects and stories online, and a better online experience brings new people to our events. This project in California is trying to remember 100 years ago in 1915 when there was a world exposition that happened in San Francisco. They rebuilt a whole bunch of the city, and a bunch of very non-traditional groups are getting together. The fire companies and the nurses and the transport unions and the telephone operators who have archives are coming together and starting to pin onto an old visitor map of San Francisco. They're trying to talk about what they have heard happened 100 years ago, and it creates a great sense of how time has changed. But the more traffic we get to this project, the more people show up when we come and have an event, and every time we come and have an event, we see a spike in traffic to the website. They are absolutely complementary to each other. So I think we have an opportunity in all three of these areas. We can create financial value for our partners, our users, our visitors in some ways. We can help them do something cheaply or help them to connect to investment or value that they can't otherwise do. Secondly, we can create high user value experiences through good design, and we can use social cues that will reward participation in these projects. And then we can create social value by connecting people to each other and to the heritage of the places where they live. To me, this is not something that I think I know anything special about. I'm not perfect at this. There's lots of reasons in which both Historypin and all sorts of cultural heritage sharing are flawed. But I think that if we collectively, as a sector, if we can show a few fairly small steps in those areas, I think we can create a sense that we're not just experts, that we're not just trusted repositories, but that we are also, in some ways, co-members of those same communities. We can perhaps transform our audiences from being more passive visitors and even users into partners and citizens who will value and contribute and evangelize our work. They'll see the value of what we offer them, and these people will share their unique gifts with us in return. And there's more of them. And so that's a very good multiplier effect for everything that we want to do. So my hope is that we can all reflect a bit on the value of our collections, both physical and digital, connect to each other, perhaps in more valuable ways, even as we take the opportunity to enrich our connections to each other and also our connections with our local communities. So I thank you very much for listening.